and Communication Studies. Introduction. Hello friends. Today we are going to discuss quantitative research. This lecture is a part of your paper, Communication Research. We will start with the answer yes to Wimmer and Dominic's 2011 question, that is, that if the tree falls, it made a noise, even if no one was there to hear it. That is, we believe that there exists an objective reality independent of the observer. This ontological belief leads us to the quantitative approach to communications research. The quantitative approach to communication research has been popular from the early days of communications research in the 20th century. It was used to understand the effect of films on children and adolescents in the Pain Fund studies from 1929 to 1932, as well as in the voter studies by Paul Lazarsfeld and his team from the Bureau of Applied Social Research at Columbia University, to understand voter attitudes and behaviors in the 1940 US presidential elections. This method continues to enjoy widespread acceptance in both academia and in the market research industry. Learning outcomes. In this module, we will explore the key features of the quantitative approach to communications research, the meaning of quantification, hypothesis testing, the importance of statistics to hypothesis testing, and the quantitative methods that are used in communications research. Key features of quantitative approach. As Wimmer and Dominic 2011 observe, there are 8 key features that distinguish the quantitative paradigm. We explore these features in detail. Number 1, reality. As we saw in the introduction, quantitative researchers consider reality to be objective and independent of the observer. They also believe that reality is divisible into parts, and learning about the parts can help researchers learn about the whole. The individual. Quantitative researchers consider individuals to have great similarities and aim to create general categories to understand them. Number 3. Generalization. Since individuals are considered to be similar, quantitative researchers aim for findings that can be widely generalized. Thus, quantitative research studies are designed keeping in mind this need for generalization. Number 4. Role of the researcher. Since quantitative researchers believe in an objective reality, the data exists independent of the researcher. Number 5. Setting. Since reality can be divided into its component parts, quantitative researchers focus on specific variables and prefer controlled settings to conduct research, where other variables can be limited or eliminated. For instance, media researchers who use the experimental method to understand recall of media content invite the participants to labs where distractions can be minimized if not completely eliminated. Number 6. Measurement instruments. As we saw before, since the data exists independent of the researcher, measurement instruments are designed to be objective and independent of the researcher. So, for instance, in survey research, it will not matter who administers a survey questionnaire, since the questionnaire is designed to be independent of the researcher. This allows large research teams to be formed for data collection. This also allows data collection on a larger scale, that is, from large samples compared to those in qualitative research studies. Number 7, theory building. The quantitative approach uses a deductive process to advance theory. That is, based on existing theory, a hypothesis is proposed and then data is collected. This data is used to test the hypothesis. If the data supports the hypothesis, then the hypothesis is accepted as a part of the theory. If the data does not support the hypothesis, then the hypothesis is rejected. Number 8, design. Since quantitative researchers use a deductive approach, the study is designed and planned down to the last detail well before data collection begins. Thus, survey questionnaires are finalized and printed or uploaded to the web if it is an online survey before data collection starts, and no changes are made after the data is collected, unlike in qualitative research studies, where researchers are able to modify questions based on data already collected. These key features of the quantitative approach to research play an important role in the process of conducting quantitative research. In the following sections, we will examine hypothesis testing, the use of sampling and the use of statistics, all of which arise from these key features. But first, we explore the idea of quantification in the next section. Quantification. Since quantitative researchers believe in a reality which can be divided into small parts and studied to get an understanding of the whole, quantitative researchers focus their research on specific variables. Variables are, in the simplest of terms, things that vary. For example, for communications researchers, memory is an important variable. As you know, our memories of media content that we have watched, read or heard vary both within individuals and across individuals. For instance, a cricket fan may be able to recall scores of a favorite cricketer, but not the movements of the Sensex. On the other hand, a stock market broker may be able to recall the exact movements of the Sensex, but not which actor featured in which action film. Further, even if a number of people have watched the same film, some may recall the dialogues or the costumes or even the names of the actors and their characters better than others. Quantitative researchers proceed by quantifying variables, that is, measuring variables in a way that those measurements can be subjected to statistical analysis. Quantitative variables are measured at 4 levels of measurement, that is, nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio level. Let us understand these levels of measurement in a little more detail, since it is fundamental to quantitative research. Ordinal level. Ordinal level measures use numbers for rank ordering. So, for instance, while we know that the student who came first in the class received the highest number of marks on the exam, we do not know by how many marks the student who came second reached that position. It could be by a few marks or it could be by many marks. That is, the interval between scores is not known. Examples for ordinal level measures are ranks in the class and birth order of siblings. They include measures that use Likert scales, which students are familiar with from feedback questionnaires such as, the course material was easy to understand, strongly disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, strongly agree, Interval level. Interval level measures used numbers with known intervals without a true zero. So for instance, if a student scores a 0 on a test of a subject, it does not mean that the student has no knowledge of the subject at all. नहीं, नीचे. So, for instance, if a student scores 0 on a test of a subject, it does not mean that the student has no knowledge of the subject at all. The student probably knows many things about that subject, just not the items on the test. Temperature is a classic example of interval level measurement. We know that water at 100 degrees is twice as hot as water at 50 degrees. But certainly water is not devoid of all heat at 0 degrees, as we are able to cool it further for many degrees. Ratio level. Ratio level measures use numbers with known intervals and a true zero. Examples of ratio level measures are all physical quantities like height, weight, age, and so on. Most statistical procedures require variables to have been measured at the interval or ratio level. Hypothesis testing. As we saw earlier, quantitative researchers use a deductive approach towards theory building. Thus, a hypothesis is proposed and tested using empirical, that is observed data. What is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a statement that presents a relationship between two variables. This relationship can be direct, that is positive, with one variable increasing as the other increases, or it can be indirect, that is negative, with one variable decreasing as the other increases. This statement of a relationship is fundamental to quantitative research. An important hypothesis is cultivation theory, which is a well-established communications theory, proposed that increased duration in television viewing is correlated with increased belief in a mean world where most people are selfish. In this hypothesis, duration of television viewing and strength of belief in a mean world are the two variables that are in a way direct, that is positive relationship. As one increases, so does the other. Researchers Gerbner et al. 1980 found that the data supported this hypothesis. Sampling. Sampling is the process by which participants in the research study are chosen. In qualitative research, samples are smaller and need not be chosen according to the laws of probability, whereas in quantitative research, statistics use laws of probability to make inferences about the sample that can be generalized to the entire population. For this reason, sampling is of utmost importance in a quantitative research. Sampling is divided into two main types, non-probability and probability sampling. Non-probability sampling is considered to be adequate for exploratory and qualitative research studies, which do not use inferential statistics and generalization. Wimmer and Dominic, 2013, list non-probability sampling methods to include convenience or availability sampling, snowball sampling, volunteer sampling, purposive sampling, and quota sampling. Probability sampling uses probability theory and is required for inferential statistics and results that are generalizable to the population. According to Wimmer and Dominic, 2013, probability sampling methods include simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and multi-stage cluster sampling. The importance of statistics to hypothesis testing. As we saw, generalization is a key feature of quantitative research. Statistics plays an important part in this goal since it allows researchers to use the mathematical laws of probability to generalize the finds from a sample to the entire population. Statistics helps determine if the relationship between two variables is due to mere chance or if it actually exists, and if it does exist, then to what extent. A variety of statistical procedures are used to examine the data and determine the relationship between the two variables. Quantitative methods that are used in communications research. Surveys, content analysis, and the experiment are the three methods popularly used in quantitative communications research. Depending on whether the aim is to establish associative links between variables or causal links between variables, researchers choose between surveys and experiments, with surveys being used to examine correlation or association between variables and experiments being used to examine the causal relationships between variables. Gunter 2002, page 210. Surveys and experiments are both used to gather data from people, whereas content analysis is used to gather data from media content in any form as long as it is recorded and available to the researchers. The survey method. As you have seen in the introduction, surveys are among the oldest methods used in quantitative communications research. Surveys are used to collect self-reported data from participants. Wimmer and Dominic, 2013, note that survey can be conducted in 5 main ways, that is, through mail, postal, telephone, personal, interview, group administration, and online. The survey uses a questionnaire as its measurement instrument. Based on the operational definition of the variable, questions are constructed. The questions are generally close-ended, although few open-ended questions may be included. Close-ended questions have multiple choice answers from which participants can make their choice. Surveys can only be used to determine whether variables are correlated, since cause and effect cannot be separated. For example, Shrum et al. 2005 conducted a mail survey to understand the relationship between the type of television viewing and materialistic values among participants. Questionnaires were posted to about 1,500 randomly chosen participants, and approximately 22% responded. Note that the researchers were not attempting to find whether television viewing caused materialism or vice versa, but was merely examining the correlation of the two variables. Content analysis. In content analysis, the coding sheet takes the place of the questionnaire as the measurement instrument. Researchers carefully view, read the recorded content and code it, after which the data is subjected to statistical analysis. Shrikant Dutt, 1991, conducted a descriptive content analysis of Indian television advertisements and found that in the year 1989, which is when the ads were recorded, high-tech was the most dominant value that was present in the ads. Experiment. The great advantage of the experiment method is that it allows the researcher to control the independent variable so that cause and effect may be observed. This method also allows the researcher to eliminate any confounding variables. For instance, Grabe et al. 2009 conducted an experiment to better understand the role of a specific medium on the knowledge gap between educated and less educated media users. The participants were invited to the lab where they were shown news stories using television, newspaper, and the internet. The researchers found that less educated media users showed higher recall for content viewed on TV, while for more educated media users, the recall was higher for newspaper and internet versions of news stories. Another type of experiment is the field experiment, where the experiment is conducted in the natural setting rather than the lab. An example of this type of experiment is the one conducted by researchers P. Sakhin and Pinto, 2010, which made it to the front page of the newspapers in India, a rare feat for any research study. These researchers explored the effect of resource to legal measures such as the RTI, Rights to Information Act, vis-a-vis resorting to bribery on the how long it takes to receive a ration card. They found that the group that paid the bribe received the ration card earliest, followed by the RTI group. The other two groups had not received their ration cards even after a year of applying. They divided their participants into a control group which merely applied for the ration card, a second group that applied for a ration card and paid a bribe, a third group that applied for a ration card and enclosed a recommendation from an NGO, and a fourth group that applied for a ration card and filed an RTI request. You can see the benefit of experimental method from these examples. The researcher is able to manipulate the independent variable so that the effect of the dependent variable can be observed. In the lab version of this method, all other variables are removed. In the field version of the method, the experiment is designed in such a way that cause precedes the effect and confounded variables are eliminated. Summary. Let us now summarize what we have discussed in this module. We familiarized ourselves with the quantitative approach to communications research, beginning with the key features of this approach, which outline the beliefs that are fundamental to quantitative researchers. We then explored how the quantitative paradigm values quantification and the four levels, nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio level, at which quantitative variables are measured. Hypothesis testing plays a very important role in the deductive process that is used to extend theory in this paradigm. We familiarized ourselves with the various methods of probability and non-probability samplings and the importance of statistics. We finally discussed that surveys, content analysis, and experiments are the quantitative methods that are used in communications research. Do attempt the questions in the self-evaluate quadrant. For further reading suggestions, please do the third quadrant. Thank you.